Hi, everybody. My name is Dia Dynasty. I am one half of La Maison de Rouge. Welcome to our weekly Monday night live broadcast Periscope. I'm so happy to see all of you here. And hello. So you know who I am, and you may not know who our guest is because she's not necessarily in the pro-dom world, but she is an amazing writer and witch and kinky person all around, and combines a lot of mystical elements in her work. This is Gabriela Herstik.
Yay!
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So I wanted to introduce you more formally to our audience. Gabriela is an author, fashion alchemist, and a sex witch living in Los Angeles. She's the author of Inner Witch, A Modern Guide to Ancient Craft, Bewitching the Elements, A Guide to Empowering Yourself Through Earth, Air, Fire, Water, and Spirit, and Embody Your Magick, A Guided Journal for the Modern Witch. Gabriela is the author of the High Priestess column on High Times magazine, and her work has been published by Vogue International, NYLON, Dazed Beauty, Allure, Glamour, and more. She is a devotee of the dark goddess of love and has been practicing witch for over 13 years and believes that magic is for everyone. And I just love introducing you so formally. Yay! Because, you know, maybe I didn't know those things about you.
It's okay. That's what happened. Yeah, all my book titles are a mouthful, so I appreciate you taking the time for that. I know it's a lot.
Yeah, but it's also, you know, like sometimes when you just have a book title called, like, you know, Inner Witch or something, like, not everybody gets that. So yeah. I'm really glad that is explained.
Thank you.
And we have a rather enthusiastic audience who also agree that magic is for everyone, and I'm excited to talk about that more. But let's start with just the basics. What are your pronouns?
She and her.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so everybody knows. And also, what are at the beginning of your story, what is the most earliest memory you have of being kinky? And it could be something that you didn't realize was kinky, of course.
Oh yeah, I feel that's a good question. I've honestly always just loved dressing very slutty. I've loved just, you know, tight things and short skirts and plunging necklines, and it was honestly probably just like being attracted or to like the aesthetic of like Catwoman or somebody like that. I feel like I can't remember the first time like I recognized like I like latex and vinyl and stuff. I feel like it's kind of always been something that I have aesthetically been drawn to. I was a pretty late bloomer with everything, so with like sex stuff, like I remember in high school, I feel like one of my friends like commented and was like, "You dress like a dominatrix," and I was like, "Ooh, I kind of like that." Taylor Momsen, who used to be on Gossip Girl, she has a band called The Pretty Reckless, and I saw them at Warped Tour like probably 10 years ago, and she was wearing pleasers and like a short dress with garter belt, and I feel like it definitely, I think that was the first thing that I noticed about, you know, like any kind of kinky aesthetic. But when I officially recognized that it was kinky, I think it was when like I was hooking up with a dude and he like choked me a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, I like that." So, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, going off of that, I wonder, you know, because I know you're spiritual.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any thoughts about maybe like past lives that may have kind of like that are reverberating in your current aesthetic.
Ooh, I love that question. I definitely feel that. I feel like the more I learn about like the like pyroduals or Kadesh, which are like the temple prostitutes in like the ancient days, both like in the Jewish temples, then temples to the goddesses like Isis and even Diana. I feel like the more I learn about that, the more I'm like, oh my God, all of these things are connecting. I grew up Jewish, and it was only recently that I learned that they even had those, you know, sacred prostitutes in the Jewish temples. So I definitely think that's a big part of it. I feel like I've been like probably burned at the stake multiple times by now in this life. So I really think I was thrown off of a cliff because I'm very scared of heights and drops. So my theory is that I was sacrificed. But yeah, I think that's the main one. I think I mean, there's a saying that's once a witch, always a witch. So I definitely feel that.
Wow. Okay. I definitely like can see those correlations. So continuing with the idea of maybe like first time origins, when did you realize that you were also a witch?
That happened a lot earlier than being kinky for me. I feel like a lot of us have, like, you know, we played pretend with magic when you're little, or we were very enchanted by nature. And for me, when I was around 12 or 13 is when I ended up discovering witchcraft, and like I knew that it was who I am. It's a feeling I still haven't had with anything else in my life. It was like coming home to myself. But it's interesting because like the farther I get on my journey with kink, I kind of have that same like recognition of discovering a part of myself that has always been there, but maybe I didn't have like the understanding of what it necessarily was. But yeah, I've identified with the word witch since I was like 12 or 13. So it's been a while.
Yeah. And did you find that to be challenging, similar to any other challenges that were maybe presented to you, like socially, especially in the way that you dressed and the way that you presented yourself as kinky as well?
Ooh, yes and no. I mean, I grew up in the Bible Belt in the Deep South, and my mom is from the Jewish community in Mexico City. My dad's a rabbi, so we were.
Wow.
It was very strange, and I knew I was a witch from a really young age. And yeah, there was like, you know, mega churches down the street, and I had friends that thought I was going to hell for not believing in Jesus. So there was definitely like an element of not feeling like I fit in. It wasn't really until I went to college and started using social media that I found a community. But I've had my hair like this. It'll be 10 years in March. So it happened. I got it shaved when I was 17. And I have always just, I recognized at a young age that I could either spend my life like trying to fit in, or I could just do my own thing and like say fuck it, which is the path that I chose. So yeah, I definitely feel like, you know, I went to college in South Carolina, and there was plenty of side eyes by old Republican men there. And I've definitely had, you know, not everybody understands what witchcraft is, which I get. I feel like that's part of my work, is help educate people. But I mean, I feel like it's my style and my self-expression are so tied to my practice with magic and witchcraft that I feel like it's, you know, I've kind of gotten judged for it, but I try not to pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah, it's easier now to, I think, ignore, because there's so much more support too. And
yeah, exactly.
So going back to when you first discovered you were kinky in kind of like a sexual setting, when you were like choked and you were kind of like, oh yeah, did you what were some of the, I guess, the next steps or the further explorations that you did, like the evolution of your sexuality?
Yeah, it honestly, I feel like it took me a hot minute to like even start exploring kink. I felt like when I first started to like recognize I was kinky, I was like hooking up with this dude who claimed to be very kinky, and then of course we had like very vanilla sex, and I was like, this is not impressive. Like, okay. It really wasn't until I moved to LA, which I've been here for just over 4 years. And I feel I'm still like a newbie, I consider it, because I've only been exploring kink for like seriously for the past like 3 or so years.
Mm-hmm.
But I moved here, and one of my friends / colleagues named Alexander Roxo hosted a Shibari retreat that was like half Shibari retreat with Victoria Blue of Vox Body in San Francisco, who's great,
Mm-hmm.
and half like healing sexual shame. So like I ended up going and writing about it for NYLON, and I got I experienced stroke bondage for the first time, and I got suspended, and I really consider that my catalyst for like actually exploring kink, because it was something that I knew about, but I didn't really like understand it fully.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I started taking classes, I started reading different books, I started kind of creating a language and, figuring out what I was into. And through that, I met some really incredible friends that I'm still really close with, and started kind of discovering that community in Los Angeles. And it's been really beautiful since then. It took me a hot minute to kind of figure out both like what I'm interested in and, like what I identify with. I just tweeted this the other day, but it was like 2019 was a year that I decided that I'm baby. Like that, I feel like that meme was so big last year.
Yeah.
And then this year was a year that I really discovered that I'm submissive. So it took a long time, but I love that, it's like magic. You're never going to learn everything. You're never going to stop growing and exploring. So it's been fun.
Totally agree with that. And it's a very personal journey, but finding community, you always have support. And you and I have even talked about some things regarding like Prodomination or the business of it. And I'm curious if you identify solely as submissive, or if you have some other kind of like, switchy or more fluid roles.
So like I definitely love the idea of like consensually hurting men. Like that is very hot to me, especially if it does include like some kind of monetary exchange or energy exchange. But I have noticed that like in my own sex life, and both with other people and just like by myself, I definitely lean way more to submission, which is something that kind of took me a second to accept, because I'm like, oh, like I do like want to kind of hurt men, but I'm like 9 times out of 10, like I want to be the one tied up, I want to be the one that's getting like spanked. And I also identify as masochist, so kind of like understanding that part of it has been it's been liberating. It's been really like it's nice to have that language. I mean, obviously, like anything, I feel like labels can at times like confine you to certain rigidity, I guess. But I think for me, like understanding that is like a part of who I am, at least right now, has allowed me to just like go deeper with it without any judgment or shame.
Oh yeah, totally. Because I think we move through, aspects of the power dynamic. And then once we kind of like maybe have explored all that we care to in that way, we put it away, and or we incorporate it into our being. And there was a time when submission was like very intriguing to me, and I find that like it has narrowed for me. It's like I will only submit under these very, 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 very narrow conditions, and maybe with like one person in the world. But so just going back to I guess where you currently are, and the idea that submission is kind of where you've accepted yourself as, and what you've embraced. When you first felt that like being suspended, what was that like for you? Like, what made you, what fire did that instigate?
That's a good question. I felt like, it was both something that was challenging. I had like hurt my neck the day before somehow. So like I couldn't really, as fully as I wanted, get into it. Like I wasn't able to do anything where my head was back. But I liked that it was challenging, and that I felt very, held by the rope, even though it's like obviously like a very intense feeling like, because it was my first time, we didn't do anything like crazy challenging just because I never experienced that before. But I do remember that kind of sense of like release, and even just like, because I never even had anybody just tie me up like on the floor, like with floor ties, and even just experiencing that and feeling the way that like I was held by the rope, it was something that I really connected with. And I like that there can be such a sense of like, I mean, obviously it's like anything else. You can make it a very like intense, not sensual at all experience. But when I was going through this with Blue, it was very like, I felt very safe, and I definitely trusted her. And like, even though I do identify as submissive, I'm like, I'm not just going to hand that power over to anybody. I'm not going to just share that with anybody. And I think that that experience with women who like held space for me in the way that I needed, reminded me and showed me that that was a space that existed at all. I don't think it was even something that I had really thought about or been able to comprehend, but it really was a catalyst for this journey. So I'm really thankful for it.
Yeah. So in also discovering that you're a masochist, how did you get to that?
Oh, I feel like that was just like, I think it was at like play parties or something, and just like getting spanked and getting like flogged. I was like, oh my God, I love this. And that's a good question. I like can't pinpoint something, but I think that, yeah, just like having that, like exploring impact play, and recognizing that like, we've talked about this. I'm very Scorpio in my birth chart. I really crave intensity. And that's something that's really important to me. And really like any experience that I have, whether it's magic or sexual or just like in life, I don't fuck with boring. That's like a life. That's just a truth. And that was it. And then about like last year, I started exploring needleplay and like just like working with sharps in that way. A lot of my relationship with kink has been solo, and like, yeah, you can spank yourself and use a crop and stuff, but like it's never going to be as fun as when somebody else is doing it to you. And exploring needles, obviously safely, taking the precautions, cleaning everything, having my sharps container. That was something that I realized I could do by myself. And I remember my friend was the one she'd been exploring needleplay for a long time. And I went over and like, she showed me how to do it and all that stuff. And I remember her telling me that like, she was like, when I realized I was a masochist, I realized I was also an emotional masochist, and I was putting myself in these situations that caused me pain. Not necessarily like being aware of it, but probably there's a certain part of you that's not aware of it. But that kind of helped me understand the different ways that, maybe I am exploring this in like a way that's not so healthy. And I feel like kink is it's been a really powerful way to like work with pain intentionally, so I don't let those kind of tendencies go into my life. But the more I get spanked and flogged and have needles put in me, I'm like, okay, no, this is right. So
yeah, well, it's really important to make that distinction, like you mentioned, that when you are kind of perpetuating these patterns of self-harm, a lot of times they're like almost like trauma responses in needing to like feel something or needing to escape or whatever. And when you kind of like take that tendency and put it in a container and play with it, it's like alchemizing it.
Exactly.
And, and so there can be this effect of healing or therapeutic feeling from that. So I'm going to ask you something very personal, and please feel free to decline. But I'm curious if you have felt any these kind of more like wounded parts of you come up during play, and have had a therapeutic effect from that or feeling from that.
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I definitely have actually something that's kind of been coming up. I mean, I'm still right now I'm not really seeing anybody. So like I have been exploring a dynamic with Dom that was a friend, and she's also a sex witch and devotee of the dark goddess, which has been really beautiful, and kind of weaving both those aspects into my both of these practices. But I noticed that like even when I'm just, like we've had a couple just like FaceTime sessions, I guess. And I feel like shame is such a finicky thing, because it's like for a long time you won't feel it, and then you'll do something and it'll come up. And I've had this shame come up around just like being vulnerable and being seen, and like I it's one of those things I can't even necessarily pinpoint exactly why that shame's coming up. But yeah, I've been trying to see it as something that I can transmute, and as something I can offer the goddess. And just like recognizing those things, like the desires that I have, like even before, like when I started exploring needleplay, I kind of had this weird shame about like enjoying it or liking it or like wanting to go farther. And I realized it's because I internalized, like my friend that was showing me was like, oh, like I'll just do one needle at a time. And I'm like, no, like I want to put like 20 in each side. Like I want to go for it. Like, and like I had taken that kind of like expectation and internalized it without realizing that like that's not a container that like I have to have for myself. But there have definitely been, I mean, now, like looking back, I can kind of see the ways in which like this wound has shown up, like in relationships with, first off, like I'm probably, like in that relationship with somebody, not really expressing what I want or my truth, because like I wasn't really aware of it. But yeah, it's been interesting. I definitely still have kind of shame around how I express my sexuality too. That's something that I've been thinking a lot about, because like I said, I love dressing slutty. I love self-expression, and I still kind of feel this like guilt for expressing myself the way I want to, or like craving the things I want to. So I feel like it's a lifelong practice of undoing that, and like you said, alchemizing it and transmuting it. And like I feel like it's like anything. It's when you create a container to experience something, and like everybody's consenting and you're being safe, it's like there's no reason to feel shame about it. But we're humans, so it still happens.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this, because I follow you on both Twitter and Instagram, and I would never ever think that you had any shame at all.
Thank you.
You're just so expressive, and you're so open, and I think that that's beautiful. And just, I guess, like, admitting that you have shame and bringing that to consciousness, and like bringing it out to play from the dark part of you is a super important element of healing. So that's really awesome that you're going through that. And then you had mentioned that your friend, the dominant, weaves magic, or her worship of the dark goddess in with the BDSM play. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Also, yeah, thank you for that compliment. I don't really have a lot of like shame around anything at all, but it's like anything, sometimes it comes up. And yeah, I definitely believe in radical vulnerability. So I am just like, this is what I'm feeling, and I think it's important to share those, because like I'm a human, I'm not perfect, and I definitely have doubt from time to time. But yeah, I've been exploring a dynamic with my dom. Her name is Goddess Sydney. She's based in San Diego, and it's been really beautiful. I have been, like we have daily check-ins, and I have tasks that I do regularly, but it's been really powerful because she helps me kind of weave this worship of the divine, like with worshiping her. So like there was a week where I sent her photos every day, and she had me explore submission through the different colors of the rainbow. So every day that week I would send a photo that I collaged that was an expression of my submissive side through the different hue. And it's cool because I have a very strict color palette. As you see, I love magenta. I also love black. But there's a lot of colors I don't wear. So, and
me too.
Yeah, I know you get it. Well, she had me meditate on, different things. I think it was like the Scorpio full moon back whenever that was, in May. And I meditated on my submissive side and how that related to the archetype of the scorpion. And she'll have me kind of do these different tasks based around the wheel of the year, the lunations. But I feel like it's been really cool because I've been able to like find this like midway point between kink and then ritual, because they're so intertwined. And I feel like the more deeply you go into either of these, the more you see that. So for me, like I've been working with different faces of the goddess since I started practicing witchcraft. And over like the past a little bit less than a year or so, I've recognized that like I feel very called to, you know, the goddess of love, but especially like the dark goddess of love, goddesses like Inanna or Ishtar or Babylon, that kind of have this like subversive quality. And I'm trying, it's like so funny, like once somebody asks you something, I'm like, wait, there's so much I want to talk about. My brain is a little bit. Yeah, it's like, I'll work a lot with roses, and I'll incorporate different kinks. Like I've, blessed rope and work with rope as an offering. And yeah, it's been beautiful. She guides me in, I guess, just like getting deeper in that relationship to the divine. I feel like she's kind of like an intermediary where like I worship the goddess and then she's kind of another aspect of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I asked you a very vague question, like very general, so feel free to go off.
Thank you.
But more specifically, we're talking about the dark goddess. And so, and another like kind of general question, like what does that mean to you? What does dark goddess mean to you?
Beautiful. So I really think of the divine feminine as an energy and as a frequency. I think to me, like saying the goddess is, there's by feminine, like divine feminine, I really think of the aspect of the divine or of something bigger than us that can't be accessed through logic and like just kind of like very like that kind of thinking. It's very intuitive. It is a vibration of feeling, something that we can access through our intuition and through our bodies. So for me, the dark goddess is this like creative force of regenerative force that works with energies that are subversive, that are not easily understood. So like, I work with Venus, for example, Aphrodite. Most people know about that goddess, the goddess of love. But to me, the dark goddess is like we all have a shadow. It's kind of like the divine's shadow. I feel like something that I've been thinking a lot about is the ancient peoples. Before there was any god, there was a goddess. And the goddess there was no distinction between life and death. It was this goddess of life, death, and rebirth. And I really believe that every goddess that we worship now, whether it's Kali or Inanna or Aphrodite or Athena, are fractals of this great goddess. And because they're little pieces, every goddess has the opportunity, or every goddess has the capability of being a dark goddess, because that is just what the goddess is. It's not just light, there's also dark. And to me, the dark goddess is the goddess of sex and the goddess of kink and the goddess of war and anger and death and destruction, because those are all part of the polarity of whatever, make up the divine. So for me, the way that I relate to the dark goddess is through honoring my own shadow and exploring the things that I feel shame around, and exploring the things that, society tells us not to explore, which is like everything that we've been talking about. So as I worship her and as I create a relationship with her, I'm able to honor and accept and cultivate those qualities within myself. And yeah, it's something that even around just like working with dark goddesses, I feel like I have some shame around, because it's not something that everybody's drawn to. And it's not really something that everybody wants to uncover and understand, but it's something that I have a very, very like big pull towards. So yeah, I feel like even
as a Scorpio, right?
I'm a Scorpio moon with the Aquarius, which so it's like I'm I'm very drawn to the subversive and to the intense. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my definition. Everybody's gonna have a different definition of the goddess. I don't like to pinpoint it to like biology because I think that is just
No.
stupid and misses the point. So
Right. And everybody has access to their divine feminine side.
yes, exactly.
Or their, you know, like divine feminine connection within them,
Yeah,
even if you're a male-bodied person, even if your
exactly.
genitalia is male, even if you're non-binary, you know, like it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah,
Um, so if somebody wanted to explore this aspect of themselves,
yes.
how would you suggest that they begin, like in a concrete
Ooh.
way?
Yes, I would say honestly, like I feel like this is I don't know. I'm just gonna say, I feel like honestly, just journaling or creating art around your desires and just like doing something to like transmute these thoughts, which aren't very concrete, into something tangible, whether it's a notebook or a Word document or like a scrapbook or a collage. I think that even just like naming the feelings and desires that you have, whether you know it's something simple like pain or just like a word like darkness, having that kind of like written out is really beautiful. And I think that beyond that, finding a ritual that you can do to connect with that, whether it's like taking a bath in the dark or meditating for 5 minutes and just like feeling what your body wants, or practicing breath work and like visualizing something, like I think that ritual, like that's kind of definitely like something that overlaps with kink and with magic,
Mhm.
because it's separating you from your day-to-day life. You're creating a container to experience something in, and I feel like something that I mean, I just came out with the guided journal, so it's something I've been thinking a lot about. I've had a pretty stable journaling practice for the past couple of years, and like journaling is like a no judgment zone. It's where you can really just be as perverted and as weird and as kinky as you want, and like there's nobody that's going to say anything about it except, you know, maybe yourself, but that's why you do it. So I think that like naming your desires and doing that, and just like if you are drawn to the dark goddess or any deities, just like starting to do research, because I mean every single culture, religion has some kind of divine feminine, even if it's, you know, like Catholics worship Mary, she's a goddess, even though they don't say that. So uh, looking back on your own lineage, and just like even just noticing the kind of artwork you're drawn to, I feel like can be a good place to start. But yeah, I feel like journaling is a good place.
Yeah. I think also I just want to add to this idea of journaling is that it's not like you're not writing, you know, like
Mhm.
you're not writing a book or you're not writing a letter.
Mhm.
And like you said, it's a safe space where anything goes, but you're not like, you don't even have to form complete sentences,
No.
you know.
Yeah.
It's just for you, and it's
Yes.
for you to like take what's up here and what's up here
Mhm.
and what's down here and
Mhm.
put it on paper, so that
Yes.
it's not all like tangled up and like kind of
Exactly.
ricocheting inside of yourself and causing like confusion. It's kind of for unwinding that
Exactly.
thread. And journaling is so simple, but like
Mhm.
so hard to
Yeah.
cultivate a practice around, you know. It's
Yeah.
like for some reason, like I myself have problems like sticking to a journal, you know, routine.
Yeah.
Um, and when I, you know, when things are really, really, you know, tough and stressful, then I'll journal out
Yeah.
of necessity. But it's for, you know, for people who don't necessarily have anybody to talk to, or if you can't afford therapy, or if you don't want to do therapy, it is the cheapest therapist.
Yeah. It's good. And just like scribbling, like writing keywords, or even just like doodling or doing a mind map, like I feel like it's not, yeah, don't put pressure on yourself for it to look a certain way, because it's really the point of it is to just transmute those intangible things to something tangible that you can like look back on and use. So yeah,
Yeah,
you don't have to write
yeah,
like dear diary, like you don't have to do anything. And if you're astrologically inclined too, like you can journal around like whatever is going on in the sky and how that affects you. So there's definitely different ways to do it.
Yeah. And also it's shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. Anyway, sorry about that.
In there, it's totally okay.
Yeah, it's really great that you suggested that and that you've even come up with a guided journal. And I was actually what I was gonna say is that, you know, you're as you said, you know, like journaling about your desires. And so this is where it can cross over into kink, and you talk about, or you write about your darkest, you know, most taboo desires, ones that are like possibly morally reprehensible, or illegal, or, you know, could violate consent. These are things that you can write about. Doesn't mean that you're going to make them happen, or doesn't mean that they should happen, but writing about them is a way of untangling that thread within you that gets all like knotted up, and you're just like, what do I do about this? You know?
Yeah.
Write about it.
Yeah, and I feel like that also, like, even just that simple act of writing it helps you kind of transmute any shame that you have, and it helps like untangle what that would look like. And yeah, having just like a journal specifically for like your sexual desires or your kinky exploration, I think it can be powerful. And it, like, I don't know, I think it's kind of fun to like go back and look and see like what you've done or how you've grown. And yeah, having a space where I can just be honest as fuck without any judgment is so valuable.
So valuable. Yay. Okay, that's great. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm going to scroll some information down here. These are Gabriela's connections. So you can connect to her through Instagram. You can connect to her through Twitter. And you can connect to her through her website. And you could probably buy her books on the website.
Wherever you buy books. Yeah.
Okay, wherever you buy books. And then also, if you have questions, then we will get to those later. But just either hold your question, or if you must, type it out into the comments, and we will come back to that. We will scroll back into it. So as far as this intersection of kink and magic, and you had kind of made this observation that there are a lot of parallels, especially with ritual kind of being something that ties the two of them. Have you noticed that anything, like, what do you think about the future of this intersection?
Oh, I feel like it's gonna just keep getting deeper. I feel like almost like all of my friends who are kinky are also witches. Or like a lot of my friends who are witches are also kinky. And I feel like the more deeply like I go in my explorations, the more I kind of see that like it is something that has been explored. But I feel like it's like witchcraft, like the interest in witchcraft has just grown so much, and even like just the like public attention to like, or not public attention, but like the kink has gone more mainstream. But I feel, yeah, I think there's so much relationship. I feel like the like subspace and how I feel after a ritual are both like such similar feelings. And I think it's I mean, it's all about energy. And I feel like kink is such, you know, it's an energy exchange. Even if it's something that you're doing to yourself, there's still this energy flowing to yourself and to whatever you're, you know, connecting to, whether it's Dom or the goddess. And I feel like there's a lot of different ways to overlap the two. I mean, like Aleister Crowley's done his Thelema, there's a lot in there. Different sects of Wicca, Gardnerian witchcraft or Wicca also uses like elements of kink. But also the witch is somebody who's been persecuted, who hasn't, you know, who's an outsider. And there's so much overlap just between like sexuality and witchcraft. They feel like witchcraft is about sexual energy. And like the more you go in that and like accepting that and exploring that, like the more it just overlaps with kink. And I think there's a lot of ways to use whatever you're into with kink to power your spells and rituals. So
totally. Yeah. I read somewhere that that the idea that brooms and broomsticks were used in ritual as like insertables, and there was like a witch balm, which was
flying ointment.
A flying ointment. Yes. That's what it was. Yeah. So I think that there is a little bit of truth to this folklore, and also the idea that treating people holistically, you know, witches a lot of times were healers in their community, and when you treat something holistically, you don't cut out any part of the person's being.
Yeah.
So sexuality is a huge part of a person's being. And of course, like bringing that into the wellness sphere, like you have to address, you know, sexuality as well. And if there's shame and if there's oppression or repression or anything like that happening, or abuse, that has to come out and be addressed. So yeah, totally. Just, you know, there's going to be a lot. It's going to go deeper. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And the idea that it is energy exchange, and people are like lonely, you know. People are lonely and touch starved, and this and I think I see people, especially in America, like trying to live this like ivory tower life where they have everything they need at their fingertips, but they can't buy any love, you know. It's like it's a way of connecting with people, and so I think that that's really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's why we need to decriminalize sex work, because sex workers are, I love you guys. And you guys, like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we have so much, I just feel like culturally there's just so much stigma around like needing like a community or needing other people. And
yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Even when somebody says like, I need you, they're seen as like needy or clingy or whatever. And we are pack animals. Humans.
Yeah, absolutely. None of us are meant to do this life alone.
Right. Totally agree. So so I have a couple of kind of like fun, lighthearted questions, because I know I've been like really digging deep. So the first one is, and you had already mentioned this, your sun, moon, and rising.
Yes. I'm an Aquarius sun with a Scorpio moon and a Libra rising.
Ah, I see it. I see that in all. Yeah, definitely. I knew you were Aquarius, but then you were talking about Scorpio, and I was like, is she Scorpio?
Yeah, I have Aquarius, Sun, Venus, Mars, and then Scorpio, Moon, Jupiter, Pluto, and North Node. So I'm very fixed sign. There's a lot for both of those, because you're Sagittarius, Aquarius, Scorpio rising, Aquarius, Moon.
No. Sagittarius sun, yes. Leo moon.
Oh.
And Aquarius rising, which is
I love that.
which is why I get along with everything that you're about, you know, because of the Aquarius.
I love that you have Leo and Aquarius. That's beautiful. That polarity makes sense.
Why, thank you. Okay, so the second question is, what are your vices and virtues?
That's a good question. I was smoking a shit ton of weed, and now I don't. I mean, thankfully with COVID, now I'm not really smoking. I'm doing a lot of edibles. I don't really even consider that a vice, because like I don't think I'd be able to cope as well as I'm coping with all this if I didn't have weed.
Yeah.
But I guess alcohol. I'm definitely creating better boundaries with both cannabis and alcohol. But my vice, I mean, I guess like, I don't know. I don't consider kink a vice, so I feel like those are all my virtues. I'm very good at being committed to stuff, which I think is why I'm single, because I'm like, I'm good at that, and I'm not trying to be committed to somebody who doesn't deserve it. But definitely my meditation practice. I've had a very consistent meditation practice for the past couple of years, so
yeah,
it's probably my biggest vice.
Yeah,
rather.
You really, it was impressive, because you definitely, you did like, I don't know, you tweeted about this, and it was like 100 and something days or something like that, or
hit
more.
2 years of daily meditation on November 5th without missing a day, which is like,
okay,
I never would have done that.
That's way over 100.
I'm at like
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like 722 today or something. I have an app that helps me time stuff, and I get gold stars for like a certain amount of days. So I'm like, I love the positive affirmation. So
Yeah, you get the gold star. I love that. I have that. I think I have that app too, and I'm just kind of like, whatever.
I'm not competitive with other people, but I'm competitive with myself, which is something that I've learned. So
I think I'm competitive with nothing.
I love that. I love
No,
that.
I need to be able to. I need that to be able to discipline myself. Like, but I just don't. Like I'll meditate and then I won't, and then sometimes I will and sometimes I won't, but I'm not like, oh, I should be meditating.
Yeah, I get that.
Just kind of,
I feel like it's everything is a two-way street, because I'm like, I'm very good at doing that, but then it's like when I have to work to be flexible and to not like feel like I'm fucking up because I didn't do something one day. So it's there's always work to do.
Yeah, there's always work to do. Okay, that's wonderful. So do you have any current projects or announcements?
Oh, I haven't really been doing a lot of events because I'm in the boat of like doing the least right now. I'm like, I'm doing all the things I'm committed to, and that's it. But I am currently writing a book about goddesses, which is why part of the reason that I'm so vocal about all of that stuff. And that will be out it'll be out in spring of 2022, which is like feels like so far away from now. But yeah, I'll be posting about that as the pre-sale goes up, which will be probably not for another year or so.
Okay. Yeah. Have you heard of Chantika?
I have not.
Okay. I learned about her when I was on some kind of spiritual retreat.
Ooh.
And she is an Aztec goddess. She's the goddess of she is actually somebody that people pray to when they're doing like BDSM stuff.
Oh my god!
If they knew about her, but she was somebody that I thought of when you were talking about the dark goddess, like the goddess of pain and war, and she's also the goddess of like the house.
Oh, cool!
Like possessions of like home.
Yeah.
Of gemstones and minerals.
Ooh.
And of I think it was. There was a few other things that almost seemed like they didn't relate, but now that you kind of put it into perspective as like what the dark goddess means to you, it was like, oh, she's clearly a dark goddess.
I love that. Wait, I'm writing this down. Her name is Chantika?
Yeah, she's an Aztec goddess, Chantika.
Oh my god, I'm so excited to read about her. Thank you.
Yeah, if you Google Chantika, you'll get like a whole bunch of like Starbucks, hot chocolate with spice, and it's kind of weird. It's unfortunate how little information there is about her.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing her to my attention. I'm sure I'll go on a deep dive and use that unending, unyielding craving for knowledge to find out more. So,
all right. So I think now would be a good time to take a few questions for our audience members, and I'm just going to go through the comments to see what's
beautiful,
here, and then anything else that pops up. So, so we have this regular audience member named I'm Tim Buss. And he says, just introducing myself as your most useless audience member. And Mistress Nikita Rain says, hello. And Ray, 1962, says, shame is confusion. You need to talk to someone like yourself. Not really sure what that means, Ray. Can you clarify? If you're still there, Ray, it would be great to hear more of what you mean by this. And then if we don't hear from Ray, I'm Tim Buss has two questions. I'm not really sure if there were real questions. So let's see. Having been led around by my D for years, can I really cross over and be the goddess I long to be? Um,
I feel like, again, I think that the energy of the goddess or goddess is available to anybody. I think like, I don't think that the divine is binary. I don't think that there's like I think for us to understand something so much more vast than we are, we put human characteristics on it.
Yeah.
And I think that if you are drawn to exploring this kind of, you know, more fluid aspect of yourself, like more intuitive aspect of yourself, and if you long to be it, that desire definitely can be met. And I think that glamour is a very powerful spell. I think that changing the way that you look on the outside can transform how you feel. You know, like I think that magic transforms you from the inside out. Glamour does the opposite. It transforms you from the outside in. And even wearing something that, you know, like maybe you admired somebody else wearing, or putting on something that is out of your comfort zone and ritualizing that in some way, would be a powerful way to start that practice. But I definitely think that if you have a desire to connect with or to know the goddess within yourself, then that is like the first step. Not acknowledging that is the first step.
Yeah, and I believe that that is the first step being taken right here.
Yeah.
And then in following that question, he says, "What steps must I take?" Which you just explained. Does my transformation require removal, or can I be permanently caged instead?
I don't think that anything has to be permanent if you don't want it to be. And I think that having that kind of rigid expectation of what that transformation would look like I think that it's, you know, I think that can cause almost like anxiety and stop you from doing it, because it's like something that's so big that you're like, no, I'm just not going to do it. So I think it can be for as long or short as you want. And I think that checking in with yourself and seeing how this process feels step by step is the most powerful way to have that transformation. Because even if you're not, you know, caged, or if you don't remove, you know, if you don't castrate yourself, which is funny because like in the ancient days, some worshippers of the goddess would castrate themselves and then cross dress.
Okay, there's your answer
So
there.
good if you wanted to, but also like just having that connection with that energy within yourself, I think is, once you experience that, you're going to take it with you, even if it's not something as permanent as like, yeah, castration or caging.
Yeah. So I'm Tim Buss. My answer for that is basically like if you really want to connect to your divine feminine and not be led around by your dick, okay? The idea that putting something in a cage will mean that it's a new, you know, feeling, and it will be on your mind a lot because you are removing access to something. So you're going to probably think about it. If you have somebody that's willing to hold the key to your cage and walk you and guide you through the process of connecting to your divine feminine while you're in this cage, that would be amazing. That would be a great way to do this. And since we have Zoom and you know, virtual connections now, that's probably a lot easier, seeing as how you're probably somewhere where that might not be readily available in person. Because I remember you're like in a different state than both of us. And really kind of this idea of connecting to the divine feminine is done in ways that have to resonate with who you are. And is really about finding your purpose. And if you've been led around by your dick for years, that means that you probably have not found your purpose. So, and then nobody can tell you what that is except for you. You know, you're the only person that can discover your own purpose, or remember your own purpose. And remember that you, as a person, as a human, are a spiritual being having a human experience. And so when you solely exist on the human level, you're not giving your spirit enough attention. And so connecting to what it means to be spiritual. And it's not like, you know, yoga or incense or, you know, meditation, or it's not any of those things unless that is what resonates with you. So you, also this is another thing that you have to discover on your own. So maybe journaling is the best thing you can do as starting out. Like you can write about like Gabriela said, what your real truest desires are, because desires of the human flesh sometimes can be really distracting and really strong, but desires of the spirit are everlasting, and they're quiet. And that's why you have to like be quiet to hear them. So hopefully that helps.
That was such a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any more questions, we'll take a few more questions. But if not, I am going to just make a super quick little banner announcement about Patreon. So subscribing to our Patreon gives you access to 30 minutes video chats monthly with Lucy Sweetkill and myself, where you can talk about anything, ask questions, whatever you want to do. Show us your new butt plug, whatever. And also a monthly subtask, which is usually something that is easy and not, like go, suck on a tailpipe or something gross. So it's not something to be afraid of. And you would be supporting our work that we do. You would be supporting all of this educational stuff and this community building that we do. You would be supporting all of these people that we connect with. So consider that, and that is at patreon.com/La Maison de Rouge. All right, so I don't see any more questions. Gabriela, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with?
That you and Lucy are fabulous, and that you should follow their Patreon and join their Patreon, because I'm sure it's delicious and perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. I appreciate it so deeply.
Yes, and I will make sure that you that you're promoted in your books and stuff and everything that's coming out for you, and very excited for all the work that you've done.
Thank you.
So audience, thank you for being so polite and for your attention and for tuning in, and we will see you next Monday.
Yes. Bye. Thanks for having me, Dia.